Na 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 na. Hey YouTube, my name is Vin. I like to play games, and welcome back to another episode of Vin Plays Yahoo Fantasy Football. This is my Week 11 recap show where I go over how well my team did, my general thoughts on any of the games that I watched, and who I'm targeting on the waiver wire for this week. So let's go ahead and jump into it. As you can see up top, we did emerge victorious again. Woot woot! We are actually on a little bit of a roll here. I think we are on a 3-game winning streak. And we triumphed over Blue Balls pretty emphatically with a 145 point to 76 point victory. A difference of looks like around 70-ish type points. Blue Balls really underperformed. His players really underperformed this week. Whereas our players pretty much performed to their projections or a little bit more. So let's go ahead and jump into our matchups. Aaron Rodgers and Devonta Adams. They had a tough matchup against Indianapolis, but Aaron Rodgers did still find a way to compete. He still found a way to score or to throw 3 touchdowns, that is, pass for, I believe, a little under 200 or 300 yards, I should say. Or 300 yards, 311 yards. This game was very competitive. It was, again, heartbreaking to me to see how bad their run defense is. They, as in the Green Bay Packers, just holes that maybe could have been plugged up during the draft or via trades that just, that just weren't plugged up. Indianapolis did end up running all over them, just like every other team. As far as the defense is concerned, or Indianapolis's defense is concerned, they are pretty good. They are really good, I should say. But Aaron Rodgers did have Allen Lazard back as secondary target, although he didn't really perform all that well. They were pretty much easing him in. I think he only had 1 or 2 catches. But yeah, the Green Bay Packers ended up losing this game in heartbreaking fashion through a Valdez-Scantling fumble in overtime. And Aaron Rodgers actually had a very heroic game-tying drive to push the game into overtime, but it was all for naught after that fumble by Valdez-Scantling and the subsequent field goal by Blankenship on the Indianapolis Colts. Going over to my opponent's side, he started Matt Ryan. Unfortunate for him. The Falcons lost Julio Jones to a hamstring injury really early in this game. I want to say sometime in the middle of the first quarter. And you know how the adage goes. Matt Ryan with no Julio is no bueno. And he showed it here. Not only that, though, but Taysom Hill performed really surprisingly well. He ran in for a couple touchdowns. They were ahead. New Orleans was ahead for most of this game. And that didn't really amount to much for Matt Ryan, who was trying to pass, but without Julio, he wasn't finding very many people. He threw a couple picks during this game as well. And to compound the situation, New Orleans defense does look very legit here. New Orleans, 2 interceptions from Matt Ryan. New Orleans defense does look good. They do look legit. They are rounding out into playoff form, and to how well they looked last year, they look pretty much the same now. But yeah, Matt Ryan without Julio Jones, 5 points. Julio actually did try to come back later in the game. He missed the whole game, and then he tried to come back during the fourth quarter, and I think he was only out for 1 snap before they ended up just pulling him for the rest of the game. We'll have to see what happens with Julio Jones. If Julio does come back for the next game, then I don't see, I can see how you could sit Matt Ryan, but Matt Ryan would return into startable territory if Julio is on the field. If Julio is not on the field, then Matt Ryan is borderline droppable as far as quality is concerned. If you're only looking for this week, then Matt Ryan would be droppable if Julio isn't playing. But anyways, going down the list, Deontay Johnson did not disappoint. He ended up with 17 points. He didn't score a touchdown, but he got a ton of yardage during this game. Like I thought a few weeks ago, it looks like Deontay Johnson is the number 1 read for that team. As long as he's opened, he will get the targets and the throws from Ben Roethlisberger. So, and he did so during this game. He got 16 targets, 12 reception, and 111 yards, as you can see down there. But he did not get to score during this game. He did not disappoint. And coming up next, well, he has a pretty rough schedule coming up with Baltimore coming in week 12. Washington isn't the greatest either in isn't the greatest matchup that is either in week 13. But he did perform really well this week. I'm very happy with his performance here. And of course, Davante Adams. Davante Adams, he's the #1 receiver for the year, arguably for the last few years. Whenever he's healthy, he is on the field and he's catching passes. He caught a touchdown during this game, ton of yardage. What can we say? He is always going to be in our lineup, and he did not disappoint this week. Going over to my opponent's side, this game with Tampa Bay versus the Rams. This was a pretty fun game to watch as well. Very competitive. Mike Evans, he did not rack up a ton of yardage, but he did score a touchdown. Like I iterated last video, if he doesn't score a touchdown, then he probably will not give you a pretty good game. He did score a touchdown here, and it's as you can see down there, 5 of 9 targets for 49 yards as well. Mike Evans did relatively well, but it was a bad matchup here, so he overcame bad matchup and Jalen Ramsey, who was on him for most of the game. And actually, you know what? The touchdown that he did end up scoring, Ramsey's was not covering him during that play. So yeah, anytime that Ramsey's was on him, he was more or less shut down. And then going over to next, Juju Smith-Schuster. He ended up getting hurt. I think he got hurt late in this game though, but he did not do well during this game. And you know what? Claypool did do well though. So again, reiterating what I said during the last video, 2 of 3 are probably going to have good games, and there's always going to be, or there's likely to be, an odd man out. I thought against Jacksonville though, this matchup would be good enough to support 3 wide receivers, but it doesn't look that way with Juju. And thankfully, it was Juju and not Deontay Johnson. But if my theory, that is, my wide receiver theory about this wide receiver core is correct, the only times that Deontay Johnson will not be putting up good games is when he's well covered. So if he's up against a good defense that can more or less cover him or shut him down, then the targets will more or less trickle down to Juju Smith-Schuster or Chase Claypool. Although Chase Claypool is the deep ball threat in that wide receiver core, so he will always be a threat to score a long bomb touchdown. It will only take one play for Chase Claypool to get his points for the week. Going back down, Nick Chubb did perform well again. He ran for over 100 yards, I believe. I think it said it right there during he ran for over 100 yards, but did not get to score a touchdown. He actually missed out on a few touchdown runs or touchdown opportunities because I believe he had, I remember reading after the game, that during one touchdown drive or one long drive, he ended up losing a contact lens when they reached the end zone, like the red zone, that is. So Kareem Hunt ended up taking those snaps in the red zone, and he ended up scoring a touchdown there. Kareem Hunt did get a lot more red zone snaps and red zone carries than we would like to see, but it is looking like that was more of a fluke situation than it is by design. So Nick Chubb did perform well, and he did look good during this game. We'd just like to see him score a touchdown. That's the only thing that was missing from his day, but I'll take it. 111 yards is, as a floor, that is a great game. Going down the list, we did start Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson did have a fantastic game, 100 yards and a touchdown. And I did not watch this game, but I was following the scores like I typically do. The game finally followed what the game script projected, and the Washington football team were ahead for most of this game. Positive game script for the Washington football team and Antonio Brown, and he did not disappoint. He got the majority of the carries, and J.D. McKissick was hardly used. I think he did get like, I think 4 or 5 targets and 3 or 4 receptions, I believe, but he was hardly used otherwise because they were not trying to play catch up. What was sad about this game though, was against Cincinnati. Joe Burrow did end up getting really hurt, ended up getting his knee busted really good, and he is out for the season because he busted his ACL and MCL. I don't know what it is about the Washington football team and just catastrophic, gruesome knee injuries happening, or leg injuries in general happening to players, to their players, and I suppose any players that are related with them. That team is probably cursed. is my prevalent theory, is my theory on the matter. But anyways, Antonio Gibson did do super well for us. Going over to the other side, Ronald Jones did not do well for my opponents, but watching this game, the Rams defense was able to shut down the Tampa Bay run game, and vice versa for that matter. Tampa Bay was really good against the Rams run. So both teams were really reluctant to run the ball in general just because they were getting shut down. And I'll talk about this a little bit more later when I talk about, spoiler alert, when I talk about Robert Woods. But that forced both teams to throw the ball a lot more than they typically do. But Ronald Jones, he did get a few carries, didn't do much with them. Rushed for 10 times, 24 yards. As far as his split in that backfield with Leonard Fournette, it looked pretty even. It was pretty much 50-50, 50% Ronald Jones and 50% Leonard Fournette. So that theory that Ronald Jones and Bruce Arians reached this mutual understanding that Ronald Jones was the better back and he'd be the workhorse moving forward, that doesn't look like to be the case. It looks like it's status quo there, 50-50 between Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. And whether or not they have a tight leash or not, because both players really didn't look good. Leonard Fournette dropped a bunch of passes as well, like 2 or 3 passes, like gimme passes, dump-off passes. So he wasn't benched after those either, but I think that was because they were playing catch-up for most of this game. They were down for about a touchdown for most of this game. So Ronald Jones did not do well for my opponent. Going on to Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry did do very well in a tough matchup as well. They were playing Baltimore this week, and Derrick Henry does what Derrick Henry does. He started off the game slow, not scoring very many points, getting very many yards. But, as the game wears on and as he just kind of hammers at the defense, it becomes harder and harder to tackle him. And he ended up scoring the game-winning touchdown in overtime for them. Derrick Henry is awesome. I wish I would have made a bigger push to trade for him before our trade deadline ended. But what can we say? Derrick Henry did well for our opponent here. Going down the line, Darren Waller really showed up for this game against Kansas City. Kansas City, man, this game was a really good game too. There was a lot of good games this week, but Darren Waller performed here. He grabbed, I believe, 80 or so yards. Yeah, it says down there, 88. He caught 88 receiving yards, that is, and a touchdown. He was the best offensive player in this game for this team, and I think including Josh Jacobs as well. But Darren Waller, stud tight end, number 2 tight end for the year. I'm that 100%. It's probably the best trade I made this year was for Darren Waller. Going over to the other side, Eric Ebron, he did end up scoring a touchdown. So and it looks like he got 8 targets according to the news here. Sorry I didn't watch this game, but Eric Ebron caught a touchdown, got some looks against a soft matchup. That was kind of to be expected. Going over to our flex, Josh Jacobs did not disappoint. He pretty much put up, he did score a touchdown. He had the opportunity to score more than that though. How many rushing yards did he end up getting? Let's take a peek here. So 55 rushing yards, that's not great. 17 carries, that's aight, as the kids used to say. But he did have a couple of chances at goal line scores that he wasn't able to punch in. So he could have easily had another touchdown to add to this. Them's the breaks, but he is getting those goal line looks, so any opportunity for a touchdown run, he's going to get for the most part. So nothing to be disappointed about Josh Jacobs' performance this week. Nyheim Hines fell back to earth after that huge game last week against, who did they play? Tennessee. And then a cherry matchup here against Green Bay. It is looking like again, this backfield in Indiana is a committee, and it is a hot hand approach. And who got the hot hand during this game versus Green Bay? Jonathan Taylor had the hot hand, and he ended up putting up a ton of yardage against Green Bay. All three of them ended up putting up, I believe, decent numbers. I think Wilkins ended up putting up like 30 yards on just like 1 or 2 carries as well. But all three of them ran all over Green Bay, but Jonathan Taylor got the lion's share of that workload. He was a hot hand during that game, and moving forward, it looks like Nyheim Hines does have good matchups moving forward for the next 3 or 4 games. But you're just rolling the dice. You never know if he's going to get the workload or not, especially since they're divvying up that backfield so equally. Looking a little bit further down the line, we do have Younghoe. He did what Younghoe does. He had 9 points. That's very respectable, and it's more than his projected points. We might have to consider, because if Julio is going to be out for an extended period of time, I'm not really anticipating that since he tried to come back during the end of the game. So hopefully it's just one of those one-game Julio type injuries that he always seems to have. But if that offense can't move the ball, then it will be rough for Younghoe to get points. Although the Falcons do play in a dome, which is always a benefit, and particularly during the next couple of weeks, because they will be playing Las Vegas, New Orleans, and the LA Chargers. I always want to say the LA Clippers when I see LACs. But anyways, for the next 3 games, they will be playing indoors, so at least that's a benefit there. And Younghoe is pretty much automatic from 50 yards in. So as long as they can move the ball to around the 40-yard line, maybe 40, 35-yard line, I suppose Younghoe will always be a threat to score. But anyways, he did pretty well this week. Justin Tucker did equally well against Tennessee with 10 points. Looking at our defense, the Cincinnati offensive line, that is, did not show up as predicted, because they never really show up. They are pretty bad, and that's to the detriment of Joe Burrow, because Joe Burrow has taken a lot of damage this year and ultimately paid the ultimate price by succumbing to season-ending injury. Washington's racked up a ton of sacks, a couple of interceptions as well, and especially when Joe Burrow was taken out of the game, which I think was middle to late third quarter. Their backup quarterback, I forget his name now, but their backup quarterback is completely awful. Any defense playing Cincinnati moving forward will probably be a good defense. That'd be something to look out for moving forward if I feel the need to stream my defenses even more. But Baltimore did have a tough matchup against Tennessee. So, Baltimore is a great defense, but Tennessee is a good team. So not too surprising that they had a moderate or a below expectations day here against Tennessee. Like I said earlier, alluding to what I said earlier, let's talk a little bit about Robert Woods. We should have started Robert Woods. He would have been our high scorer for the game. Well, other than our quarterback, other than Aaron Rodgers, he would have been the high scorer for the game. I think this really fell into game script. Was the reason why Robert Woods had such a fantastic game, and pretty much all the pass catchers on the Rams had a really good game. The Bucs were able to stop the Rams' run game. They couldn't get anything going on the ground with their committee of Darrell Henderson, Cam Akers, and Malcolm Brown. So Jared Goff and Sean McVay, they just pretty much ran a passing game for virtually the entire game, for the whole play clock, and so consequently, Robert Woods got a season high for targets at 15 targets, caught 12 receptions with 130 yards and a touchdown. this was easily his best game of the year. I don't know if I could fade Robert Woods anymore because this was a tough matchup and he still performed for us. Let's take a look at his schedule. San Francisco next, which is a tough matchup, but you know what, man, San Francisco is better against the run than they are against the pass again. It should be a similar situation game script wise to Tampa Bay. So man, it might be hard to sit him next week. I'll have to consider that during our starter show. But anyways, that pretty much goes over our matchup for this week. And Yahoo was kind enough to grade me with an A+ rating. Let's go ahead and check my standings real quick. The standings didn't really change too much. The top 3 stayed the same because we all won. Von like Donkey Kong, the drafted, and myself won. It's going down also won. Blue Balls I ended up beating, so he got knocked down a peg, but Booyah also got beat, so they were pretty much stayed even as well. You know what? We have 2 games left before the playoffs start. This is my league does have a 6-team playoff structure, so the first 2 seeds do get a bye during week 1, and I think I'm really in the mix for that bye. If we can get a leg up on either Von like Donkey Kong or the drafted, that would be great to get that week 1 bye. And I'm talking about that a little bit because that's alluding to our waiver wire decisions, because this is going to be rough. This is going to be a rough time on our waiver wires because we have 2 guys that I'm expecting to come off of IR, Deebo Samuels and Raheem Mostert. So typically if I knew that I would only be at third place and I could not move up, I didn't have that possibility of moving up to first or second and get the bye, then I would probably drop one of my defenses. I'd probably drop Washington, even though they have a cherry matchup here, in order to activate Deebo or Raheem Mostert. But right now, since I'm in the thick of it, I really want to win these next 2 games to see if I could reach that second. I could, get at least second place for that bye. So now I'm trying to consider who I want to drop. Carson Wentz did have a really awful game, so I don't mind so much dropping him. I actually watched this game. Man, I really believe in Carson Wentz's talent, and I believe in that team's coaching staff. I believe they do have a good culture and a good coach, but they just look so awful. I'm not sure they're going to be able to pull it together this year. Even if Aaron Rodgers went down, I'm not sure that I'd feel comfortable starting Carson Wentz. So right now I'm leaning towards dropping Carson Wentz here, but also I took a peek at my waiver wire at who was on the waiver wire, and J.K. Dobbins is freaking on the waiver wire. You know what? He did test positive for COVID, so he will be missing this week. But this is kind of exciting because if J.K. Dobbins, he did perform well and he got the lion's share of the work during this game. It really looks like they made the transition for him to become the workhorse back. And if that's the case, then I really want to keep this guy away from my opponents. Von like Donkey Kong isn't the strongest at running back. Neither is the drafted or it's going down for that matter. All 3 have their holes at running back, and I still have a bunch of fab. As you can see there, I do have $62 left in fab, and so I really want to keep J.K. Dobbins away from these guys, and I am going to put a sizable bet for him. The problem is we're going to have to decide who we get rid of, who we drop. We have 2 guys coming off of IR. After we could drop Carson Wentz for Deebo Samuel, and then Raheem Mostert. Man, do I want to drop my defense, my Los Angeles defense? They do have a tough game, well, potentially tough game against San Francisco here. But man, San Francisco, and then a potentially tough game against Arizona. So maybe we'll have the opportunity to pick them up later. Or maybe we drop Evan Ingram, our second tight end, and just hope that nothing bad happens with Darren Waller, which isn't, knock on wood, but isn't a guaranteed in this plague world that we're living in. But yeah, we have a lot of decisions to make here. But more or less, waiver wire wise, the only guy that I'm looking out for is J.K. Dobbins here. Um, I might, I think I saw New Orleans defense, and they are playing against Denver, which is another good defense. So I was considering whether or not I wanted to drop the Washington football team for New Orleans just for this week. Although, that the matchup between Dallas is a good matchup. Although Dallas did show signs of life this week, they did look a lot better. They actually pulled out the win versus Minnesota. So I'm not feeling quite as good about this matchup as I did last week. But otherwise, we just need to make space because Raheem Mostert and Deebo Samuel, and hopefully I'm going to make a huge bet, a huge bid that is, for J.K. Dobbins. So yeah, we might have to get rid of Gio Bernard, even though that Joe Mixon is going to be out for at least the next 3 games. And gut feeling here that Joe Mixon is probably done for this season. Even though he's probably done for this season, we might have to drop Gio. And it's not the worst drop since his quarterback is out. His starting quarterback is going to be out, and the backup did look awful. But yeah, this is going to be a very stressful waiver wire situation over the next day or 2. And with that said, we'll end the show here. Thanks again for watching another episode of Vin Plays Yahoo Fantasy Football. My name is Vin. I like to play games, and I'll see you next time.